Hello and welcome. My name is Kirk, and we are going through the Iliad from book 1 to book 24. You can start here. I'll give you a recap, or you can go to the beginning. I try to make each video self-contained and enjoyable. Today, we're going to be going over book 6 or chapter 6. So I have created what I think, and I think this obviously, as the greatest translation of the Iliad for first timers. And I spent a lot of time working on this to make it the Iliad, so it's actually the Iliad, and to make it enjoyable, epic in iambic pentameter, so it's in verse, but also pare down some things so that it is not as confusing, I think, as approaching it on your own, the Iliad by many other translations, which are wonderful translations. So you could check this out. Go to troubadour.studio/Iliad to get one chapter of this for free, so you can kind of see if you think it's for you. And then I hope you will consider purchasing the book, and it'll be, shipped out to you. It's in digital as well as print form. So we're going to go over chapter 6, book 6, one of the more beloved chapters in the Iliad. This I have titled, in my version, Hector's Farewell. So just to give a recap, if you're joining us now for the first time, over the last 5 chapters, we have Achilles refusing to fight in the war against Troy. He abandons the Greeks. There is a brief moment when Greek and Trojans try to basically conclude the war by a duel between Paris, who, remember, abducted Helen, and Menelaus, who is Helen's rightful husband. And he is the king of Sparta and the brother of Agamemnon, the big leader of the Greek expeditionary forces. But this duel fails, and the war erupts more ferociously than ever. The Greek hero, this is the chapter we were just in before, in chapter 5, the Greek hero Diomedes fights valiantly, and it seems perhaps the Greeks do not need Achilles and can finish the war on their own. And that's where we kind of are at now. We're here in chapter 6, and we're going to see that at the beginning of chapter 6, the fighting is still pretty brutal. Now, in my translation that you can get at troubadour.studio, I have an introduction to each chapter that kind of tells you what's going to happen to help prepare you for the verse, especially if you're not used to reading verse. And then there's little sections at the top of each. There's a whole bunch of sections in each chapter that helps guide you along so you know what's happening. So that's how we're going to break down this video, is we're going to have the different sections. The different sections are, and there are 8 different sections. There is Greek victories and rising tensions, Agamemnon's ruthless orders, Hector receives Helenus' counsel, Diomedes and the Trojan Glaucus exchange histories, a really interesting one. Hector visits the women of Troy, a tense confrontation with Paris, Hector and Andromache's farewell, the brothers return. That's going to be Paris and Hector, the Trojan brothers. So let's go through this one section at a time. Greek victories and rising tensions. The Greeks press hard against the Trojans, with great warriors like Ajax and Diomedes cutting down enemies, bringing hope to the Greek side. So remember, they didn't think they could do it without Achilles, but now they're starting to think they could do this without Achilles. I'm just going to read one of the deaths. So we'll often talk about deaths in the Iliad. Some people call this the book of deaths. There are incredible fighting sequences that are very realistic. But Homer always does something very interesting. So here's one. It's not the most bloody one, but I just wanted to point out the standard way that these deaths happen in the Iliad. Then Diomedes, skilled in war's loud shout, slew Axylus, Tithyrus' noble son, who lived within Arisbe's well-built halls, a wealthy man who loved his fellow men. He welcomed all who passed within his door, but none could save him from his bitter fate. He and his charioteer, Calesius, both fell that day and passed beneath the earth. So notice what we get here. Now in this one, we don't get as much of a spear going through skulls and throats and bellies and groins, which you get a lot of in the Iliad. Here it's just the simple death, but what you get is the standard way of going about it. So Diomedes, the Greek hero, who's in his great Greek heroic moment, kills Axylus, who is a rich man, it says, who lived within Arisbe's well-built town. That is a town that is around the big city of Troy, and it's one of their allies. Now, who is Axylus? We get that. We always get a sense of who the person who dies is, and that's important. He's a wealthy man who loved his fellow men. So he's very magnanimous, generous. He's a good guy. He welcomed all who passed within his door. So guest friendships, which is very big and important in the Iliad, he is an exemplar of this. And yet he dies. That's really important. But none could save him from his bitter fate. So he had friends, he had guests, people loved him, and yet he still died. He and his charioteer both fell that day and passed beneath the earth. So you get his name, a little bit of his lineage, and you also get something characteristic about his person. So it's not just about some nameless entity that is murdered and slewed into the dirt. You get a sense for the total life of that person. And all these deaths that you'll see throughout the Iliad have a variety of ways that this is done. And I like to point them out because it helps you see that the thematic purpose of a lot of this is to really emphasize the loss, that there's something really tragic about war. And it seems obvious, but we still do it as humans a lot. And we need reminding all the time about the cost. And I think Homer really makes it clear. And the last thing I'll point out that is very relevant for this particular chapter is that we feel sadness at the loss of Axylus, but he's Trojan. Who is Homer reading this to? Greeks. So he's having you feel pity and sadness over the loss of an enemy. The next section is Agamemnon's ruthless orders. And this will include the word of the day, which I'll get to in a second. But first, let me read this little section. The setting of this is Menelaus has gone and he's in the fight, and he is going to kill, or about to kill, this young man named Adrastus. Adrastus clasped his knees, Menelaus' knees, and begged for life. Quote, "Spare me, O son of Atreus, and take a worthy ransom. At my father's house lie treasures rich, great stores of bronze and gold and iron. He'll pay all gladly if he hears his son is captured at your mighty ships." The words reached deep in Menelaus' heart. He thought to spare him, send him to the camp, and call someone to guide him to the ships. But Agamemnon came and shouted loud, "Dear brother, why this kindness for our foes? Have Trojans ever shown us gentleness? Let none escape our grasp. Let all be slain. Yes, even unborn babes within the womb. Let all of Troy be lost and memory purged." And with such words he swayed his brother's mind. And then they kill Adrastus. So that leads us to the word of the day, Hikatia. Now, that is the act or the rite of supplication itself. So the whole activity that Adrastus and Menelaus are engaged in is Hikatia. And we're going to talk a little bit about this because it's very important for the understanding of the warrior culture of the Iliad. Now, this concept, Hikatia, has a variety of different usages and ways that it can be used in terms of verbs and actions and nouns and adverbs and things of that nature. So, for instance, there's a hikates, a suppliant, or the person making the plea in the process of making it. So when he's doing that action, he is a suppliant, Adrastus. He is a hikates. When he is supplicating, he is begging as a suppliant in that moment. He's a hikatios. There is a thing that we think of today as the olive branch, and this is where this comes from. That is the suppliant's branch. That is a hikateria. Now, the protector of the hikatia, the god who oversaw hikatios and made sure that you actually performed this correctly and enforced it in general, was Zeus, who is thought Zeus Hikatios, divine protector. Hikitilates, that is the receiver of the supplication. Real quick to review. There's Hikatia, there is the Hikates, there's the Hikatio, and then there's the Hikatilates. That is the one who receives or grants the plea. You have the Adrastus, who is the Hikates, and Menelaus, who is the Hikatilates. Now, all you really need to know, you don't need to know all those different words and how to pronounce them correctly and everything like that. Really, you just need to understand the concept of supplication and why it's important. So before we go into that more, I want to go into the choreography. So this is a very ritualistic thing. And you'll notice when you read the Iliad, you get actual instructions for many different rituals, and this is one of them. There's also one for how to be a proper guest friend. How does a host treat a guest? How does a guest treat a host? There's rituals of what you're supposed to do. Just like in America, there's kind of a ritual when you meet somebody, you shake their hand. So in ancient Greek, there was a way when you entered someone's house that you put your spear aside and there's certain activities that you do. We're going to get into that at some other point. Today, I want to go into the choreography of the suppliant, because guess what? This is chapter 6, and we've already seen this before in a very different context. So here's the basic choreography as scholarship has defined it by looking at all these different examples of supplication. First is the approach. In our example of Adrastus and Menelaus, we have the person grasping the knees of another person. So we have the Trojan Adrastus grasping the knees of Menelaus. This can also be done at an altar or a hearth, like almost the fireplace of a greater or an equal person in a foreign land. So you might ask for supplication and protection by going to like the equivalent of a Greek church at the time. This is before Christianity, of course. And you would beg for protection, or even a great, like a wealthy man or the king of that city, of that town that you're going to, and go to his hearth or around the fireplace where they might meet and seek protection by a ritualistic way of going about it. You generally clasp the knees. Often you touch the chin or beard of the person that you're supplicating to. So you kind of go like this. You put one arm around, or one arm around the knees, put the other under the chin. And I'll show some pictures of this. There's a lot of famous vase paintings and paintings of this ritual. Now, there's other ways of doing this. You don't have to grab the chin. On the battlefield, that's kind of what you want to do, is you kind of want to show that you're not a threat, right, by holding their knees. So you show them your other hand. So it's kind of similar. This is how we think about it in Christianity today. So you're supplicating, you're begging for mercy. That's what this symbol does. And it also shows that you don't have anything in your hands, right? So if you're on the battlefield, you're like, please don't kill me, please don't kill me. Then you're showing that you don't have any tricks up your sleeve. And it's the same kind of thing. So you grab the knees, but it also is a kind of way of telling them, please don't kill me. You grab their knees and then you put their chin up, or you hold their chin and you kind of ask for forgiveness or for mercy. And at a hearth or an altar, you might just hold an olive branch or some kind of supplicant branch. And then you make the formal plea. You invoke the gods, usually, Zeus Hikasios, offering ransom, which you saw in the Adrastus. He says that my father's very wealthy, and if you ransom me, if you hold me by the ships, then you will get a great ransom. You will make a lot of money. And then you wait the response. And acceptance is sometimes signaled by raising the suppliant up. So that's kind of, you think about a knight raising after being touched by the queen to become a knight, you go to your knees and you come up. It's that kind of ritual. And you raise them up and grant that request, or you refuse. And in this case, Menelaus does refuse. He stabs him in the chest, puts his foot on the chest and pulls out the spear. What this tends to do in a lot of Greek culture, in a lot of Greek literature, is create what's called a miasma, or a pollution. And that invites the potential for divine anger, which we get a lot of in the Iliad, of course. Now, we saw a positive experience of this earlier in the book. And that is when Thetis goes to Zeus. So Thetis is the mother of Achilles. she goes to Zeus to beg that he start to let the Greeks lose. So as they battle, they need to lose and the Trojans need to win so that Achilles can show to the Greeks that he is the greatest warrior and that they need him so that he can fulfill his destiny. And what Thetis does is, if you remember that section, she grabs his knees, she puts her hand on his chin, and she begs him in a formal supplication. One of the things that these kinds of rituals do is that they make it clear to the audience, and in real life, which this would have happened sometimes in real life, is that it invokes formally Zeus's protection, which means that if you go against it, you are going against Zeus, who guards the suppliant and compels reverence. There's also kind of forcing of empathy here. So that's kind of what happens when if you think about the chin, you think about Greeks, what do you picture? There's a beard. So you might want to grab them by the beard and make them look at you before they kill you. So say like, look at me, I'm a person, don't kill me. And sometimes I think this would work. So that's your Greek word of the day. And we will explore these words more as we go, but I think it's important to understand, especially some of these core Greek concepts. And supplicant or supplication in English doesn't always get the real nature and fundamental act that this was. Like, we have supplicants in the world today. We have people, for instance, who come to America trying to seek refuge and asylum. And there are specific legal things that they go through to try to achieve this. Well, this was kind of a similar type of thing, in the sense that you were begging for some kind of protection that was up to the magnanimity, the kingliness almost of these people at the time. Okay, so that's Agamemnon's ruthless orders. Agamemnon says, no. We are not going to have Hikatias. We are going to kill this person and show no mercy. So they are going to invoke the wrath of the gods, which is not going to be a coincidence, because you might assume, or you might think of what is going to happen if you know the story, where the tide will change, partially because Achilles isn't there, but also because the Greeks aren't making it easy for the gods to protect them, because they're doing things like this. The next section, Hector receives Helenus's counsel. Now what this is, Helenus is a famous seer, S-E-E-R, or a prophet, or someone who looks into the heart of nature through bird signs and different omens to give an indication of what's going to happen, and gives good counsel, good advice. He's also Hector's brother through the king Priam, who has 50 sons. What Helenus tells Hector to do is to go back to Troy. So Hector's, in front of Troy, in front of the walls of Troy, fighting against the Greeks. He's in the thick of battle, and he sees his brother Helenus, who says, you have to go. Now is the time to go and pray to the gods to make the tides change. So remember what we just saw. Agamemnon goes against the gods. He defies Zeus by destroying the supplicant. And then we have the next scene where Hector is going to abide by the gods. And he's going to do something very specific, which is going to go to the women of Troy and ask them to put out a very elaborate ritual to beg for the gods, particular gods who have been against them, to try to be on their side for a little while. So I'll just read you a quick little section here from Helenus. But Hector, go and hasten to the town. Tell our dear mother and your own as well to gather all the noble elder wives and climb to where Athena's temple stands upon the height, and open wide the doors. Let her lay down the finest robes she owns, the one she loves the most beautiful, upon the knees of bright-eyed Athena's forms, and vow to sacrifice 12 yearling cows, unyoked within Athena's sacred shrine. If she will pity Troy, our wives and babes, and keep that fierce man Diomedes back. So he keeps going, but what he's saying is Diomedes and the Greeks, who Athena is on their side. So we've already established Athena wants the Greeks to go, but they are going to beg for Athena to simply stop this this great heroic moment of Diomedes. It takes an act of God. He's that powerful at this moment. Now we're going to go to the next section. So Hector leaves, and the next section is Diomedes and Glaucus exchange histories. And this is a really interesting one. In the midst of the battle, you have Diomedes, this great warrior who's slaughtering all these Trojans. And you have a Trojan hero, Glaucus, and they meet on the battlefield. Now, you would think that you would just simply go right into the action of fighting, but that's not what they do. What they do is they have an exchange of lineages. Now, I'm not going to read this whole thing. You can, again, go check out my book and read it. There's an interesting series of stories that Glaucus in particular is telling to Diomedes about how they actually know each other, or at least their families know of each other. And this is important. Lineage is very important in Greek culture. In fact, this is important in Middle Eastern and Mediterranean cultures for thousands of years, and it still is. There's an interesting book called The Strong Horse, and what they relay is if you go to many Middle Eastern cultures today, you'll often see an experience where two Middle Eastern men, for instance, will meet on a street randomly, or maybe they're in the marketplace, and they'll be chatting with each other. And a big part of the cultural experience is they will go through the lineage of their family heritage, trying to identify if there's any locations where they have crossed each other's paths, their families have. And that is something that you see here very starkly. And it does take, it is the case where Bellerophon was taken care of by basically Diomedes' family earlier on. And Bellerophon is I think the grandfather or the father of Glaucus. So they find that they do have this lineage in common. And here's what's really interesting about this moment, though. Once they do that, Diomedes says some words, and here's what he says toward the end of the speech. So now I count you as a cherished friend, both in our land and yours if I arrive. Let us avoid each other in this fight, nor raise our spears against each other's life. There are enough for me among your ranks, the Trojans and their mighty warrior men, whom I may battle as the fates allow. And you can face the Greeks as you see fit. But let us now exchange our armor here, so all may know that we are friends by birth. Thus having spoken, both men leapt to earth and clasped each other's hands in solemn pledge. Then Zeus withdrew wise judgment from Glaucus, who traded golden armor for mere bronze, an exchange worth 100 oxen more. So in other words, Glaucus loses his frigging mind, is what Homer says, by giving this gold armor to Diomedes, which is kind of like giving a Ferrari to Diomedes. And Diomedes, what does he give? He gives like some, 1995 Honda, right? That's in exchange for, it's not really exchange, it's an exchange of gifts, but it's just so unequal that it's just laughable. And there's a lot of speculation as to why Homer included this little moment. I think this is my opinion, and you can make your own understanding by getting the book and reading it for yourself. But what I think is going on here is this is actually kind of a moment of Homer pointing out the silliness of war and the silliness of all of this activity and behavior, that there's something really weird about the way that humans act in war and this kind of thing. It's like a caricature of this moment. I think the Greeks at the time were supposed to laugh like, oh my God, what an idiot. Like, I think that's what they should be saying. It's like, he gave him a Ferrari. Like, what is that guy thinking? It's just, all he had to do is just give him the equivalent of a Hyundai, just give him like a little, or give him one piece of armor or something small, but no, 100 oxen more. It's worth more than 100 of what that's crazy. And it kind of, it's almost like a cartoon caricature of this moment that happens on the battlefield and all the sillinesses of war and how these two friends are meeting. Picture all the brutality and the again, spears going through skulls and things like that all around them. And they're like, we're friends now. You can go kill those people. I think the whole thing is supposed to kind of highlight some of the silliness. And it is an example of a very important ritual, which is this guest friendship ritual, which we'll talk a little bit more as we go down the line. This is not supplication, but it's another kind of ritual. And there's all kinds of rituals like this. Now, the next section is Hector visits the women of Troy. Now it's almost like a camera is going to sweep. And meanwhile, great Hector reached the city gates, the Scion gates beneath the towering oak. And we have these different images as we're zooming in now on Hector as he goes to see the Trojan women, to get them to lay out that beautiful robe and beg and pray to Athena. So here's quickly the prayer. This again, I'm skipping a lot of stuff and just kind of giving you some highlights. But this is the prayer that they say here. O grandest Athena, protectoress strong, breaker of armies, goddess most divine, shatter the spear of fierce Diomedes and make him fall before the Scion gates. Then we will offer 12 young cows to you, unyoked within your holy sacred shrine. And then if you will pity us and save our town. One thing you'll notice about a lot of these things in the Iliad is there is repetition. And that's because this comes from an oral story. So this is a story that was told over the course of several days, read by a bard out loud by memory. And there's a lot of repetition, partially for the bard himself, but also to remind you, the reader, what's going on. So that's the prayer that they ask for. And notice that they're not really even asking for total victory. It's almost like they understand that Athena loves the Greeks. All they're asking of her is just break the heroic moment, this godlike moment of Diomedes. That's all, just to give them a chance not to be slaughtered. And that's all they're asking for, which is a reasonable ask, even of an enemy. You might be able to get that going. So that's that section. And the next section is a tense confrontation with Paris. Remember, Paris is the brother of Hector and essentially the cause of all of this. Now, Hector's pissed when he sees him because here's what he found. He found his brother resting in his room, polishing armor, shield, and a curved bow too. And Helen sat beside him with her maids, directing them and weaving wondrous cloths. So imagine this. And I always, and I skipped this, but earlier Hector turns down a break and, his mother says, have some wine, relax for a moment. And Hector's like, no, there's too much to do. And I'm not going to drink this wine for myself. I'm not going to even pray to the gods because I'm unwashed. I'm dirty, dusty, bloody. So I picture Hector covered in blood from battle. He's probably got nicks and scars of his own. He's covered in dust and dirt. He's exhausted. Just picture him and he goes over to Paris, who's the cause of this whole damn thing, who had a duel with Menelaus and was whisked away by the goddess Aphrodite, his protector. And it's like, oh my gosh. And then what does that leave? That leaves Hector there to fight, just like, like he always does. And what does Paris do? He's basically, sitting around, getting pampered by his women and, making love. And he's polishing his armor, making it really beautiful. You want the beautiful armor. And here Hector walks in like, just bloody, like, what is going on? And you could just imagine how furious he is. And he says, strange man, why do you nurse this bitter rage? The people die around our city walls, and all because of you this war is fought. If you saw some other man hold back from battle, you'd be quick to chide him. So rise and fight, or must our city burn while you delay? And then Paris is like, yeah, you're right. I'm a fool. I'm a wuss. I can't believe I'm doing this. And he goes on. And eventually, they calm down and Hector leaves. Now, here is where I think is probably the most famous scene, probably one of the most famous scenes in the entirety of the Iliad. And that is Hector and Andromache's farewell. Andromache is his wife. So there's a lot that could be said about Andromache's speech to Hector, where she's lamenting and sad that he's going to go back out and fight and she thinks might die. And she is mad at him in a sense. And here's what she says toward the end of her speech. She says, you are my all, my father, my mother, brother, and my love. So pity me and stay here on the wall. Do not make me a widow and your son an orphan, left alone without his father. So we see in this whole section, we see Hector not just as a warrior. We see him as a father, as a husband, as a brother, as a lover, as a son, as a friend, as a compatriot. So we see all aspects of him. And remember, Hector is a Trojan. He's an enemy to the Homer's Greeks who he's talking to. But we see the totality of his life, and he's mortal. That's really important. He's mortal. He's born to mortal parents. Kings, yes, but mortal. So he's very different from his equivalent on the Greek side, which is Achilles, who is a demigod. He is the son of Thetis, a goddess. Now, what's interesting to me is what Hector says. He says a lot of things that he wants to be a good model for his son, which is why he wants to go out and fight and be courageous, because that's what it means to be a good man. And you need to, in the Greek way, you need to earn the right to be respected by even your son. This is pre-Christianity. So it's not honor thy father no matter what. It is honor thy father if they earn it through their great actions. So you have to take the great actions and earn it. But one of the things he's most afraid of is not just the falling of Troy and the letting down of his father and all the people of Troy, but it's a personal value. He says that, for deep within my heart and mind, I know the day will come when sacred Troy must fall, and Priam's line and people will be lost. But more than all the pain of the Trojan men, or even Hecuba's or Priam's grief, or that of all my brothers who will fall, it is your fate that weighs upon my soul. When some bronze-clad Grecian leads you off in tears, a captive bound for distant lands, to Greek lands, weaving a stranger's loom, or drawing water from a foreign well, oppressed by cruel fate and harsh command. Then someone seeing you will say, behold, this is the wife of Hector, bravest one of all, the horse-taming Trojan warriors, when they fought round their city, so they'll say. And the point is that he's most afraid of what's going to happen to his wife, and he would rather, he goes on to say that he would rather die than see that happen. So he's going to die first before he could ever see anything like that. Now, here is probably the most of this section, the most famous image. So saying, Hector reached to hold his son, Astyanax, who, frightened, drew back, cried, and clung to his nurse's flowing robe in sudden fear. He shrank from shining bronze and horsehair crest that nodded fearsome from his father's helm. Remember, he's covered in blood and gore and dust and armor, probably scratched up. And he's got this fearsome helmet that, kind of shakes around as he moves. And the baby looks at this as terrified. Now, the next moment is a tender moment between the family. Then Hector and his wife both laughed aloud. At once, brave Hector took his helmet off and set it gleaming on the ground nearby. He kissed his dear son, held him in his arms, and lifted up his prayer to Zeus above. O Zeus, and all you gods, please grant that this, my son, may be like me, a noble man, strong and brave and ruling here in Troy. May people say he's greater than his father when he returns with treasures from the fight, and may his mother's heart feel boundless joy. Now, I want to point out, and I'm going to read one last thing here at the last section. So that's Hector's prayer for his son Astyanax. Keep that in mind. And I want you to notice something really interesting. The last section is called The Brothers Return, where Paris and Hector leave the walls of Troy to go back to the battle. The last lines of chapter 6 are this, and this is Hector speaking. But let us go. We'll settle these concerns if ever Zeus allows us to enjoy a cup of freedom in our homes again once we have driven out the Greek invaders. So and this is how this is translated. You can go to the original if you're interested, but I want you to see this. Earlier, when he spoke to Andromache about his fears, look at what he said. For deep within my heart and mind, I know the day will come when sacred Troy must fall, and Priam's line and people will be lost. Hector first says that he knows Troy is going to fall, and he laments the sadness of Andromache. When he picks up his son, what does he say? I hope that you will rule here in Troy, right? And then what does he say at the end when he's talking to his brother Paris and they're leaving? I hope that we will have a cup of freedom in our homes again once we have driven out the Greek invaders. Now, is this inconsistency on Homer's part? No. That's how some people think of it, and they're wrong. Hector is the antithesis to Achilles. Hector is in the position of any normal human warrior. When a warrior goes to war, they may lament or think that, oh my God, I'm going to die. I can't believe this is happening to me. But none of them really know their fate. They are all like Hector. In some moments, oh my God, I'm going to survive this. I can't believe I'm going to make it out of here. In other moments, oh my God, I'm going to die. I can't believe I'm here. So that's where Hector is. He is in one moment, I'm going to die. Everyone's going to die. My wife's going to be a widow. They're going to pillage and destroy and kidnap and abuse sexually my wife. No, I'm going to defend the walls and we're going to succeed and do this. Let's do this. That's the state of almost every warrior in the history of the world. How is this different from Achilles? We'll get into this more, but Achilles is unlike any other warrior in the history of war. He knows, undoubtedly, no doubt about it, it's in his fate, it's built in the stars. His goddess mother, who talked to Zeus himself, said, if you stay and fight in Troy, you will die here soon. If you go home, you will live long life and be forgotten. Stay in Troy, die, and your name will live forever. Go home, live long life, your name will fade quickly. That is an unusual, weird thing. And it's important to understand this kind of difference between these two characters. One really is a demigod, and one really is a human. And he's very human. And we see all the aspects of him. I think in this chapter, we really get a sense of that. And that's why I called it Hector's Farewell. It's been called many different things, this chapter. It's given many different titles. I like Hector's Farewell. Okay, so that is chapter 6, or book 6 if you prefer. I hope you'll join me for the next video. Make sure you like, subscribe, go to troubadour.studio and check out my translation. Again, I think you'll really enjoy it. I've been reading from this, so I think you'll really enjoy it. And, let me know what you think. So thank you so much. Leave some comments, and I will see you on the next video.